An orphan girl risked everything to save a bear cub from a raging forest fire. 10 years later, what she does is truly terrifying. The dry season had turned Peshtigo into a ticking time bomb. Walls of fire danced across the horizon, devouring everything in their path. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground trembled with the roar of the blaze. Shari spotted a bear cub, badly burned, paralyzed by pain, its eyes locked on hers with desperate helplessness. Just hours earlier, a 10-year-old girl had been clinging to her parents' hands, fleeing the inferno, swallowing the Peshtigo forest. But then, in the blink of an eye, everything was gone, and what happened next would change her life forever. The fire tore through the forest like a rampaging beast. It shrieked through the wind, roared across treetops. Fed by relentless gusts, the flames spread at a terrifying pace, turning Peshtigo into a hellscape. The sky glowed an ominous orange, and a choking, acrid smoke blocked out the sun. In that living inferno, Shari, her hair soaked with sweat, her face streaked with ash, was trying to keep up with her parents. Her small feet stumbled through mud and smoldering roots as flames surged on either side, like living walls closing in. She didn't scream, but the panic in her eyes said everything. Her mother gripped her hand tightly. Her father led the way, beating back the fire with his jacket and handfuls of green branches. There was no plan, only one goal: get out of the forest. Then, with a crack like thunder, a burning branch the size of a car crashed down in front of them, cutting off their path. Shari's mother fell. Her hand slipped from her daughter's. Her father turned back instantly, trying to pull her mother to her feet. "Run, Shari!" he shouted. But she couldn't move. Frozen, wide-eyed. That was the last time she saw their faces. The fire surged up from the forest floor. A blast of searing wind slammed into Shari's face. A heartbeat later, her father shoved her backward, hard. And then they were gone, swallowed by fire. Shari fell, hitting her head on a half-burned tree trunk. The world blurred. When she came to, everything was ash. No more screaming, no more footsteps, no more parents, only the smell of char, the sound of wind whistling through blackened trunks, and a cracked earth littered with glowing embers. No one answered when she called. Just empty fire pits and scorched ground, stained a heavy ashen gray. No bodies, no trace, only a void. Everything wiped away in a single breath. Night fell fast. The cold wind carried the distant howl of animals or wolves. There was no one left to call, nothing left to hold on to. By mid-morning, as the sun climbed higher, Shari followed a narrow trickle of water winding into the earth, hoping to find a fresh pool. She ducked beneath scorched bushes, and suddenly a faint whimper broke the silence. Shari froze. At first, she thought it was a dying animal, maybe a deer or a wolf, but the heavy, trembling breaths carried something else, a fragile, almost childlike tone of pain. She stepped closer, crouching behind a fallen tree, holding her breath. There, in the middle of a scorched clearing, lay a bear cub. Its eyes were barely open. Its chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged gasps. One leg was swollen, twisted at an odd angle, fur singed and patchy, with raw flesh exposed beneath torn skin. The air was thick with the sharp stink of burnt fur and sweat. Shari instinctively stepped back, fear tightening her chest. A bear, even a small one, was still a wild animal. Her father had once told her, bears become dangerous when they're hurt or scared. Shari shivered, clutching the frayed wool scarf in her hand. But It didn't growl. It didn't bare its teeth. It just lay there, wheezing. And then it looked at her. A gaze, faint but unmistakable, met hers. Shari stood frozen. Her heart pounded in her chest. She should turn away. She should run. But that look, the helpless way it stared up at her, it was the same look she had given her father just before he pushed her out of the fire. She couldn't walk away. Step by step, Shari moved closer. Each footfall a silent choice. Closer. Closer. The cub didn't flinch. It just breathed. When she was within reach, Shari knelt slowly and placed her scarf gently in front of it. She whispered, "I won't hurt you. I'll help." She used a curled leaf to scoop up water and let a few drops fall on the bear's cracked lips. Its tongue flicked out, catching each drop like a treasure. Then, from the small backpack slung over her shoulder, the only thing that had survived the fire, Shari pulled out a piece of cracker. She crumbled it carefully and placed it near the cub's nose. After watching for a long, silent moment, she began to examine the wounds. Her hands trembled, but her eyes sharpened with focus. Her father had once been a forest station vet. Shari had helped him clean tools, listened to him talk about burns, about how to treat injured wildlife, how to wrap wounds to keep them from getting infected. She was just a kid then, but she remembered. She tore a strip from her old shirt, soaked it with water, and gently cleaned the injury. Carefully, she removed bits of debris and wiped away dried blood. The bear cub let out a sharp cry, its body flinching in pain. Its claws scratched weakly at the dirt, as if trying to crawl away from the burning sting. Its eyes flew open, wet with tears. Not angry, not fierce. Just afraid, helpless. Shari wrapped the leg with the softest scrap of cloth she had left. By the time she finished, the sun was leaning westward. The cub still lay still, but now its breathing was steadier. That night, Shari didn't leave. She sat beside it, her back against a charred tree, clutching a stick for protection. But instead of fear, she felt a strange calm. For the first time since the fire, she didn't feel alone. "I'm going to call you Boone," she said softly, remembering a word from the old local dialect. It meant gift. The days that followed were a trial of survival. Shari built a makeshift shelter by the stream, a hollowed-out fallen tree with a roof of bark and branches. She lit small, smoky fires to keep the bugs away. Each day, she foraged for berries, caught streamfish, and dug around old roots in search of underground water veins. Boone still couldn't move far, but as his strength returned, he began dragging himself forward, then walking again, slowly, on 3 legs. Whenever a strange noise echoed through the forest, an owl's call, a distant growl, Boone would give a low warning rumble. But fire and cold weren't the only dangers in Peshtigo forest. There were poachers. One night, the crunch of heavy boots shattered the quiet, followed by hushed voices and beams of flashlights sweeping through the trees. Boone stiffened, his fur bristling. Shari pulled him back into the hollow, holding her breath. A flashlight passed right over their hiding place, just for a few seconds, but it was enough to make them both freeze. As the footsteps faded into the distance near dawn, Shari finally exhaled. Boone glanced at her and did something that defied everything she'd ever learned about predators from her father. He nudged his nose gently against her shoulder. A silent ritual, a wordless comfort between 2 survivors. Boone healed slowly, but day by day there was progress. His leg could now bear weight. He no longer lay still for hours like the first days. He stood, took steps, rested. And Shari stayed by his side, always just close enough to reassure him, never too close to overwhelm him. Life in the forest began to find its rhythm. Shari reinforced their shelter by a quieter stretch of stream where the water was clean and few human tracks appeared. She built low walls from fallen branches, layered leaves over the roof, and set aside a cozy corner just for Boone to rest at night. By day, they ventured farther in search of food, berries, fish, sometimes wild roots or mushrooms. Boone had a keen nose. He'd sniff out ant nests when food was scarce or alert Shari to anything moving in the underbrush. Boone was growing. His fur thickened, dark and glossy. His eyes sharpened. His steps grew steadier. He was no longer a cub. Sometimes he'd dash around the stream, pouring water toward Shari before darting off again. She chased him, laughing, for the first time in what felt like forever. Boone would circle back, bow his head, and nuzzle her gently. Sometimes they had to avoid predators, wolves, lynxes, even another large bear that wandered near the stream. Boone would step between Shari and the threat, growling low. The other bear backed off. In moments like that, Shari always kept her hand close to her wooden staff, but she never once had to use it. That day, while picking berries in the low woods, Shari heard something unfamiliar. A mechanical hum, alien in the natural silence. An engine. She pulled Boone behind a tree. From the distance, figures appeared, wearing uniforms, carrying binoculars, radios, and marking flags. Rescue workers. Shari's heart pounded. She'd forgotten the world outside. She never imagined anyone might still be looking, but they were here. She burst from hiding, waving her arms. "Over here, I'm here." One of them turned. Then all of them ran toward her. They surrounded her with water, a thin blanket, voices that echoed like they came from far away. They checked her vitals, asked her name, her age, when she went missing. She answered, but her eyes kept searching. Boone. She turned toward the trees. There, on the slope, Boone stood, half hidden in the shadows. He didn't run, but he didn't come closer either. He just watched her. "Wait," Shari said to the rescuers. She broke away and ran toward him. Boone didn't move, just stood there, watching. As she neared, he took half a step back. "Boone," she whispered. "I have to go. These people, they're my people, but I don't want to leave you." Boone stared at her for a long moment. Then he took another step back. Shari didn't cry, but her voice broke. "I don't know if I'll ever see you again, but you have to live. Live, Boone, and don't forget me." She stayed where she was, didn't reach out. Boone bowed his head once, then turned, and walked, slowly, purposefully, into the deep woods. He didn't look back. Sometimes they had to avoid predators, wolves, lynxes, even another large bear that wandered near the stream. Boone would step between Shari and the threat, growling low. The other bear backed off. In moments like that, Shari always kept her hand close to her wooden staff, but she never once had to use it. That day, while picking berries in the low woods, Shari heard something unfamiliar, a mechanical hum, alien in the natural silence. An engine. She pulled Boone behind a tree. From the distance, figures appeared, wearing uniforms, carrying binoculars, radios, and marking flags. Rescue workers. Shari's heart pounded. She'd forgotten the world outside. She never imagined anyone might still be looking, but they were here. She burst from hiding, waving her arms. "Over here, I'm here." One of them turned. Then all of them ran toward her. They surrounded her with water, a thin blanket, voices that echoed like they came from far away. They checked her vitals, asked her name, her age, when she went missing. She answered, but her eyes kept searching. Boone. She turned toward the trees. There, on the slope, Boone stood, half hidden in the shadows. He didn't run, but he didn't come closer either. He just watched her. "Wait," Shari said to the rescuers. She broke away and ran toward him. Boone didn't move, just stood there, watching. As she neared, he took half a step back. "Boone," she whispered, "I have to go. These people, they're my people, but I don't want to leave you." Boone stared at her for a long moment. Then he took another step back. Shari didn't cry, but her voice broke. "I don't know if I'll ever see you again, but you have to live. Live, Boone, and don't forget me." She stayed where she was, didn't reach out. Boone bowed his head once, then turned and walked slowly, purposefully, into the deep woods. He didn't look back. When she returned to the rescue team, her eyes stayed fixed on the place where the forest had closed behind him. The Peshtigo forest was never the same. After the Great Fire, charred stumps lay like stubborn memories that refused to fade. But nature has its own way of healing. 10 years passed. Fresh canopies unfurled across the once silent land. New growth pushed up through ashen soil. Deer, owls, and lynx slowly returned. And among it all, Shari came back too. She was no longer the lost, fragile girl who had once wandered these woods. Now she was a young forest ranger, wearing a thick khaki jacket, sturdy boots, a radio on her belt, and a blade at her side. Her face was calm and steady, but her eyes still held something soft, something only those who had lived in the wild could carry, a quiet kind of understanding. Shari hadn't chosen anywhere else. She chose Peshtigo. It was where she had been born a second time. She knew every trail, every stream, every moss-covered stone. She knew when the bears went into hibernation, when the deer moved in herds. Shari told her colleagues what had happened 10 years earlier, about the fire, the bear cub, everything. But all she got in return were doubtful glances and soft laughter. A black bear wouldn't just lie there while you patched it up, they said. And it sure wouldn't live peacefully with a human. It would have mauled you. It probably would have survived on its own anyway. Weeks turned into months. Life settled into routine. Patrolling trails, tracking poachers, helping injured wildlife. But Shari often scanned the edges of the meadows, searching for a familiar shadow. And one day, she saw it. A black bear, following her truck from a distance, always staying just out of reach. At first, she thought she was imagining it. But then, it kept happening. At first, no one believed her story of a bear that seemed to be watching over her. But soon, even the skeptics saw it. The black bear never came close to anyone, but it was often spotted on the horizon whenever Shari was out in the field. Even the most cynical rangers couldn't deny it. Wherever Shari went, the shadow followed, like a silent guardian. The dry season brought new challenges. Relentless heat dried up water sources, making animals restless and unpredictable. Territorial clashes between herds grew more frequent, and poachers took advantage, targeting the few places where wildlife still gathered to drink. One afternoon, the forest was unusually silent. Shari was following strange tracks along the edge of the woods. 3 individuals, heavy boots, sacks, and likely armed. She trailed the footprints to a sunken clearing, once a dried-up creek bed now covered in fallen leaves. On her 3rd step, she heard it, a faint click beneath the leaves. She knew instantly, a tripwire. Before she could react, the trap snapped. A wooden beam whipped across and struck her leg, sending her crashing down. She fell into a shallow pit, cleverly camouflaged. Sharp branches stabbed into her thigh. Her shoulder slammed into a tree root. Pain shot through her. She tried to rise, but her leg gave out beneath her. The sound had drawn the poachers. 3 men appeared, peering down at her from the edge of the pit. "Well, well," one of them sneered. "Little Ranger lost her way?" Shari pulled her knife, her hand shaking. Blood soaked her pant leg, dripping from her thigh. Still, she kept her voice steady. "You're trespassing on protected land. Drop your weapons and leave now." They laughed. One of them jumped down, gun aimed straight at her. "You really think you're getting out of here?" No one got a chance to answer. A roar shattered the silence. Deep, massive, rolling through the forest like thunder. Leaves trembled. The earth itself seemed to hum. The poachers froze, spinning toward the sound. From the tree line, a black mass emerged, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Backlit by the setting sun filtering through the trees, the creature's hulking shape cast a long, fearsome shadow. Boom! There was no roar, only presence, a silent, unshakable force that made the air feel heavier. Its coat gleamed in the fading light, its shoulders broad and towering. Those deep, dark eyes bore into each man like it was etching them into memory. The one nearest the pit staggered back. "Bear, big one, back off." Another's voice trembled. "That's no ordinary bear. I've seen it before. It's the one that flipped Dakota's trap truck last year." They turned to run. Too late. Boone charged. No snarls, no wasted motion, just long, thunderous strides. In seconds, he was there. A swipe of his massive forepaw struck the first man square in the chest. He flew backward, slammed into a tree, and crumpled, unconscious. The other two didn't wait. They dropped their bags, weapons, scrambled through the underbrush like men fleeing a nightmare. One tripped face first into the bushes, but scrambled up again, running without a backward glance. Boone didn't chase them. He stopped at the edge of the pit, bathed in the quiet glow of the setting sun. Standing tall, those deep eyes fixed on the wounded girl he had never forgotten. Shari opened her eyes, stunned. "Boone," she breathed, almost disbelieving. He didn't growl. He didn't move. That gaze, calm, unwavering, exactly as it had been 10 years ago, rested on her quietly. She lifted a shaking hand, reaching out. When Boone lowered himself, carefully, gently, shielding her from the wind, she touched the thick fur on his side. It was warm, forest-scented, familiar, the smell of beginnings, of that first day, of the little girl who had once held him in her arms, surrounded by ash and flame. The distant wail of a rescue siren broke through the forest hush. The poachers were gone. Boone heard it. His ears flicked. He lifted his head, glanced toward the forest, then turned back to look at Shari one last time. No goodbye, no wave, just a step back. Then another, and Boone turned, fading into the trees, just as he had 10 years before. Shari lay there, watching until the dark shape melted into the canopy, swallowed by green and gold shadows. Hours later, the rescue team found her. Her wounds weren't critical, but she was utterly drained. They asked what had happened, what she'd seen. Shari just smiled. "A bear," she said. "A big one." They nodded, doubtful, but she didn't say anything else. After that day, the story of a massive black bear charging out of the forest to save a young ranger spread quickly through the local community. Newspapers dubbed it the Guardian of Peshtigo. Locals whispered of a living legend. But strangely, no one ever saw it again. Boone disappeared the same way he had come, silently, without a trace. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and hope from the natural world.